Today's conversation takes place with director and actor Celyn Jones in Wrexham, where filming partly took place on Celyn's directorial debut, The Almond and the Seahorse. As well as co-directing with Tom Stern, Celyn also stars in the film, alongside Rebel Wilson, Charlotte Gainsbourg, and more. The film focuses on two couples whose lives have been affected by traumatic brain injuries. The film won the Special Jury Prize at the Dinard Film Festival. Celyn, thank you very much for joining me today. Your film is The Almond and the Seahorse.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So I think for me, when I was watching the film, it has a lot of themes which I'm very interested to talk to you about. One of those is identity. So to start off with, for you, how do you define this film? How are you explaining it to people when there are so many things inside it?
I think it's about love and memory. You know, the power of being remembered and the power of being forgotten. And I think it's, and how identity can be loose and transient and change. And it's sort of the tragedy that it isn't set in stone, you know, like opinions. You know, it's so, I think we put a lot onto identity as a fixed piece of stone. And it isn't, because something can happen and change everything. A lump, a diagnosis, a bump, an accident, a chance meeting, look across a table can change the weather, the water, the oxygen in the air. So, you know, as not to sound too poetic or too stuff like that, I think, you know, the solid things in it are love, memory, and the power of memory when it is remembered and when it's forgotten. And survival, I guess the key thing of, you know, the human spirit. So, you know, it's a story about surviving, you know, getting the shit kicked out of you by life and surviving it, you know. So yeah, it's a brutal love story. There you go.
That's good. It was poetic. I don't think it was too poetic. It was good. So in this case, the story itself starts its life as a play. I think it's just 2008, Kate O'Reilly, and you are in this play. I'm wondering, was it at that moment that you were thinking about a film adaptation? You know, what is that process to go from the play to here?
I did think the play was a really enjoyable experience, and I loved the characters, and I loved Kate's writing, and I loved the play. I loved the reaction that it had off the audiences. I loved the fact that the audiences came, and we didn't know, you know, we knew it was a great piece of writing and it had a great cast and stuff, but we didn't know that the reactions would be so raw and human. And people who were affected by brain trauma, carers of people who had brain trauma, came to see the play, and they laughed and laughed and laughed and cried and cried. And so it was a very, very human experience. And to answer your question, I did think, in fact, I went for dinner with a couple of producers, not to be named, after the show, and said, I think you'd make a film. And they went, no, it's not a film, it's a play. And I was like, I think there's a film in there. So that was the idea. And then years went by, and I had, you know, my career carried on, and life carried on, and I had children. And then I started my filmmaking journey 10 years ago. And sort of after a couple of years into that, Kate got back in touch with me and said, you know, what do you think about Almond as a movie? And I thought, well, funny you should say that, because it's never gone away. I always thought it was a really great piece that was sort of undervalued and underappreciated and undershown. It did really well critically, but it didn't have the right marketing behind it as a play, and it never reached its potential in that respect. So it was unfinished business. And also I really liked the character. I thought, wow, I'd love to play a character like that on a bigger canvas. Explore Joe in that respect. So we then took the play, and then the challenges of it being a play, then Kate was really fantastic, because she said, I want the play to be the play, but I want the film to be the film. So we rewrote loads of it. We changed loads of it. We she wasn't super precious about it. She wanted to obviously keep the essence of it in the story, but she didn't want to put a play on screen.
Yeah.
And she's a very lyrical writer. She's sort of Irish, Brummy, lived in Wales. She's an award-winning playwright and dramaturg, and so words are her superpower. And when you get into film, it's sort of finding a different language, a visual language to do things. But at the same time, it is about people talking and listening and not being heard and being heard and trying to find a voice or a new voice and stuff like that. So you can't take them away. And also there's that thing where people go, oh, there's a few characters and people are talking. Is it a film or stuff like that? I think...
Okay. From what I understand, it was in Cardiff, I think, the Sherman Theatre, and you went even North Wales. I think it was in Moulds at some point, and Manchester too. So it went around a bit, but I guess not so many performances. No.
We did Cardiff, and then we went to Brecon.
Okay, yeah.
And then we went to Aberystwyth, and then we went to Mould.
Yeah.
And then it finished its run in the Contact in Manchester. And then it had an opportunity to go into London, but it was very mismanaged by the theatre company at the time, so they didn't want to get behind it, and despite its critical success and stuff like that, and whether those people have got to hear it, they missed their opportunity because it was a brilliant play and people wanted it, but they didn't have the resources or the time or the inclination to allow it to go into London or go to Edinburgh or something like that. But
yeah,
that's just the show business,
That's showbiz, baby. Yes, okay, yeah. No, that is a shame. But I think, just speaking to you now, obviously you were playing the same character in the play as you are in the film. So maybe one of the first things people have mentioned to me when I tell them about the film is that they've heard Rebel Wilson is in the film. So in terms of the cast, you're reprising your role. You've got Rebel Wilson, and then you've got Charlotte Gainsbourg. You've got this amazing cast. I'm wondering about how you managed to bring those people together. What was that process like? And did you start with yourself? Were you like, well, I'll just keep doing that again?
Well, I think that was always going to be, sometimes you have to put your colours to the mast and go, well, that is my role.
Yep.
And I think I'm the right person to play that role, and I want to play that role. So it was always the case. I was always going to play Joe and adapt the screenplay. The directing of the film came a little bit later. And then, as with all independent films, you have ideas of casts, and they move and they ebb and flow, and people attach and then don't attach, and then move on for different things because it's independent film and you're chasing all these things. And then you end up with the cast that you can't imagine sort of never being in it, at the day. But our casting director at the time, our casting director of the film, at that point had just met with Rebel.
Okay.
She was in London and she was looking for a very different type of film. She wanted to stretch her dramatic chops. She trained as a dramatic actor. She studied as a playwright. She'd had this amazing career in comedy, but she wanted to come to the UK and Europe and and do some acting. So her agent read the script. She read the script and she was on board. Okay. So that was relatively painless. But all of a sudden, you're putting together a film where you've got a hugely famous actor doing something they've never done before. At the same time, it's a directorial debut, and then, I have a certain profile, but I don't have Rebel Wilson profile, kind of thing. So you're then putting together the film structurally and the money in place, and COVID hits and all those sort of things come like that. And the trickiest moment in the play, it was two mixed sex couples. It was a boy girl.
Okay, yeah.
So Charlotte's character Tony was originally Tom in the play, and that was the character. And it was one of those roles that was really difficult to cast, and we were sort of pushing for it needed an actor who had the courage and the profile to do it, and it was an unlikely type of storyline, and especially it required courage and bravery. And then a sort of conversation with Rebel, and she sort of said, am I okay to swear?
I think why not? We'll find out.
We'll find. It's not a bad swear word, but this is just quoting her. And she sort of said, Kel, if we can't find an actor with big enough balls to play this part, why don't we ask a woman? Mm-hmm. And from that, I thought, well, who is courage? Who do I think is super courageous actor, female actor? I thought Charlotte Gainsbourg, and 2 days later, Charlotte was attached, and the script was changed. And
that's fast.
Yeah, and it was like she clicked with it and liked the idea of doing something completely different, and liked the idea of playing opposite Rebel, and it all of a sudden made real sense to the journeys of those characters, and then Trina Dearholm, who's a genius, she came on board, and then all of a sudden you're putting it together at a rate of knots, really. So, but independent film is like Jenga, isn't it? Pushing blocks in and pulling them out and stuff.
Not only do you need the pieces, but the timing of placing them together, of course. And when you talk about COVID and things like that, I imagine that was quite a difficult process coming towards production for this film.
Oh yeah, we were right in the eye of the pandemic. So we had to live in a bubble, and in a way, me doing multiple jobs sort of reduced the COVID risk, because I was doing 4 jobs. One person doing 4 jobs, I could be in the center, I can be the actor and the director and the writer and the producer, all those things in it. But that was it really was like having a knife to your throat, metaphorically, throughout the process, because at any moment you were waiting for the film to be shut down. Yeah. And it wasn't. We completed every day, and we were on time and on target and on budget. But every day, you do the test and think, please, please, please don't any of us have it, because we haven't got the time and the resource to come back and do that. And thankfully, we were good. But it, super stressful.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? We'll probably look back at a lot of films from this period in the future, just like considering like the definite like background anxiety of all those performers and all that crew. Like these films were made under like you say, like you've got an axe hanging over you potentially, and the film, if it gets shut down, you never know if it will get back up, type of thing. So yeah, that's difficult to go to work every day with that.
Yeah, well, like Spielberg making Jaws, and everyone's going, isn't it great? And he's like, the shark was rubbish and we couldn't use half of it, and it turns out to be a virtue, and someone was talking about this movie, and they were like, oh, I really liked the shot of Charlotte in the car, and how you shot through the windscreen and the top shot. And I'm like, thanks. We weren't allowed in the car. That was the problem. We couldn't, we couldn't, there were whole sequences that we were shot that couldn't be used because supporting artists couldn't move around the set. So you become quite stationary. You have to think, but that's filmmaking. You have to always problem solve all along and think, well, we can't do that. We can't have a room with 100 essays. We have to have a room with 5 essays, or we have to find a different way to tell the story, or we can't use it. Anybody who makes a film deserves a round of applause and a pat on the back, because it's a huge endeavor. Takes an army to do it, and so many things have to fall in place. But people who've made a film during COVID, I think special props, really, because obviously, and let's say it's not as challenging as thousands and thousands of people had it during COVID. We made a film. We weren't. It was a very, very real thing that probably changed the fabric of our culture and our society. Just going through that experience together. So I don't want to make it out to be. It wasn't Dunkirk. It was just made making a film more difficult. That sort of thing. So I don't want to sort of look for too much sympathy there, really. Yeah. But it's interesting that here we are releasing a film, what the characters were going through is that they're sort of waking up in a different time. The characters with traumatic brain injury, my character and Trina's, they're waking up in a different time every day. Yeah. But actually, with Tony and Sarah, Charlotte and Rebel, they're waking up in a different time emotionally because the people they love has changed. So, interestingly, this film coming out, this film was about characters who've been locked in a situation and were stepping out for the first time, made by people who were locked in a situation. Like there was art, it was very meta sort of going on there. So I think going back and looking at film, I guess looking at films that were made under those conditions, where were we when when we watch them, when we make them?
And it probably adds something, like you say, like Spielberg and the Shark, it adds something, even if it's not that clear at the beginning, maybe. So in terms of, the difficulties you've had to get this together and everything, and you've got your cast, what I'm wondering is, how do you know you've got it right? Do you have rehearsal time? Because you talk about this, the actors are obviously phenomenal, but still, as a director, I think one of the, if not maybe like 90% of it feels like that casting has to be right. But even then, there's work to do. So what's the moment where you're like, yes, we've got it right?
Yeah, I mean, do you ever feel like you've got it right?
Okay, maybe not. Yeah.
You do the best with what you can, at the moment in time. I'm very, very proud of the performances in this film. I mean, a point I missed, which is sort of going through, the challenges are not just making the film, but financial challenges. All of a sudden there were deals that were made for you to get the money to make the film that were no longer there because COVID had happened. So then you have the choice of, do we keep making the film? And you have to go, well, it's all here. We have to keep making it and find a way. They're just the challenges. And I'm if people are interested in independent film, then it's important for us all to sort of talk about. I mean, I can sit here and say, oh, everybody was marvelous, and yes, I won the award, and blah blah blah. And I could talk about all those bits, but there's also really real bits as well, where what it takes to put something together and the fine line it is, and it sort of makes it all a bit sweeter. We sort of dust that under the carpet when something comes out and go, oh, yeah, it was all marvelous, darling, really good, and I think it's even more marvelous when we sort of highlight the shadows as well. But with the actors, everyone is different, and that's what this film says. That everyone has a brain, and no brain is the same, and no brain heals the same, and so you can't. Everyone is different. People need different things. Some actors need very little direction. Some need more. Trina, who is kind of like Denmark's Meryl Streep, she does not want a guy, someone like me, giving her a monologue about this and that and that. It's too much information. She's such an open, alive sort of performer. It's more very simple suggestions that can send one way or another, because she's got that whole kind of emotional recall. With Rebel, it's very different because she's doing something she hasn't done before. So she's got this level of expectation on herself. How amazing. She wanted to put herself up against two world cinema legends in Charlotte and Trina. Griff, who does the soundtrack, Griff Rhys, who I've worked with on 2 films now and I've been a fan of since I was a teenager. He said it's as real and honest and as chaotic as life itself, and that's what it is, because sometimes with a story like this, one can put all the characters on the same stage. Yeah. And where's the drama and conflict in that? If they're all from the same factory line, if they all have a similar look and a similar timbre, and, the whole point is that we are very different, and we're forced to connect and disconnect and reconnect and stuff like that. And that's what's entertaining, interesting. It's that Joe is a very different character to Tony, and Sarah's very different. They're all so different to each other. And you embrace that, just like you embrace all the actors coming with their own different processes.
So this is
that answer your question?
I mean, yeah, it does. I think.
I mean, when do you know it's right? I mean, how often can you push? How often can you push? You get it. Actors go for it. It then becomes about, do they need to go a bit more? Do we need to pull back a bit? How many goes at it do we go? I don't think you can. I mean, Kubrick was a genius, but I don't think I was ever going to push for 80 takes. We didn't have the money or the reel or the time for stuff like that. And also, I don't think it's necessary. Yeah. Sometimes it's there in one, sometimes it's there in, two. Sometimes you give the actors what they need, and when you've got it, you've got it.
Well, that is actually the next thing I want to talk about, is because a lot of those decisions, they're directorial, right? And this is your feature film debut as a director.
Yeah.
So again, I'm wondering about approach, and you've just touched on it a little bit there. But before that, maybe specifically, like, why is this your feature film debut? And not just like why are you choosing this story, but why now for you as a person?
I mean, I never knew it would be my debut. Also, it's only right to say it was co-directed. I co-directed with Tom Stern, who's the director of photography, who's a very, very experienced cinematographer. So, it was a dual endeavor, should we say?
Yes.
So that has to be, and we both wanted to tell a story like this. I don't think it's as. I guess I do a lot of jobs as an actor, and and all these things. You never know which project is going to go next. So I never knew Almond was going to be, if it was going to go first, or. And when we started, I never knew I was going to direct it. I just knew it was just about making the film happen. So it was a little bit more pragmatic than that.
Yeah, okay.
Which is okay, Yes, I've read all the books and seen the things, and people's manuscripts burning in their soul, and they won't cut their hair or shave until they've made that film, and that's great. But for me, it was this film. I wanted it to be told for Kate. I believed in the story. I thought it was great. Had a great message. I thought it was great for now, and I didn't want it to not be made. So in the end, I ended up putting on my pants and pushing it and going for it, really, and then trying to do the best job possible. And I think my next film will be different because it won't be co-directed. And if I was doing so many jobs there, it made sense that, Tom, while I was watching everyone else, Tom could at least be watching me.
Right. Well, yeah. What is Tom's role in that case? Because like you say, it's a legendary cinematographer, and again, notable his feature film debut as well, I believe. Right?
Absolutely.
In that case,
yeah. He was only 74 when we did it, and Tom was. I mean, Tom had a sort of rebirth. He credits Clint Eastwood as giving him the gift of youth in an interview, and in the fact that Tom was a very famous gaffer, and he was Conrad Hall's gaffer.
Okay.
So and Conrad Hall, this is the chap who shot Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Road to Perdition and American Beauty, genius cinematographer, and Tom was Conrad's gaffer. And then when Conrad passed away, it was Clint's idea that Tom would then move to be a cinematographer, which took a little bit of convincing, but he did it. Clearly took to it like a duck to water and did all those, I think, seminal Clint Eastwood movies like Mystic River and, Iwo Jima and American Sniper and, all those amazing sort of things. And then, so all of a sudden he went from, so he'd had that regeneration thing. So he wasn't scared about coming to do that. And in his own words were, if I can, if I can do it for Clint, I'm sure I can do it for you, Cal. And that's why we did it. So it became a sort of, a beautifully pragmatic, problem solving. We had to prep it through Zoom.
Yes.
We met on the recce in person, but we'd had 10 months together virtually.
How had you met in the first instance?
We were put together by a potential financier who was friends with Tom and loved the project and wanted to see it made, and said, well, I think Tom would like to direct something.
Okay.
And I think the subject matter would really chime with him. Can I send him the script? And he read it and liked it, and we Zoomed and we got on and we did it. You know,
I mean, that's quite wild, isn't it? That just happened. Yeah. Okay.
But isn't it? But it's wild. But I think it's kind of real and beautiful as well, because quite often we can, you know, I'm all for pulling back the curtain and saying, you know, it's not a wizard. It's just a guy making it up. You know what I mean? There is no grand Wizard of Oz. It's just, and I think that's the beauty in it. You know, there's a beauty in and an honesty and a poetry in the fact that the reality of just making things happen and bringing people together to make it happen. You know, and appreciate the technical sort of prowess of individuals and stuff. So, it's wild in the fact that it's kind of so like practical.
Yeah, it just seems so, I don't know. I'm imagining, you know, you're putting this film together and you get this type of conversation or call, and somebody is like, oh, this legend of your art form might like what you're doing here. I mean, it just seems so perfect in a way. I'm glad it worked out, and I feel quite honoured that he was here shooting something in Wrexham. That's so weird to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, Wrexham's a super cool town.
Yeah, it's perfect, yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, that's it. It's sort of you know, dispel the myth. You know, you ask people to do something that they've never done before. And quite often people are really interested in that. From actors to technicians to HODs and storytellers. And I guess a lot of our films that we've made have come from pulling together those connections that you make. Because that's what happens in other industries and other jobs, you know. Yeah. You meet somebody and go, oh, I know a guy. I met a really cool guy called Rob. He had this groovy office in Wrexham, and he, you know, knew how to put stuff together. It does work like that, you know, rather than a committee that ordains people and says, you know, you can have your dreams come true. It isn't that, you know. It's far more tangible and hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, without you pushing to get the film made and being so pragmatic, you know, this conversation wouldn't have happened. Of course, yeah, it is. You're sort of making your own luck in a way, but it worked out beautifully, I think. So that's good. Yeah,
and I think people do make their own luck 99% of the time.
Yeah.
They just don't tell that out loud.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like they go, "Oh yeah, someone saw me." You know, like we're all pushing stuff up the hill.
Yes,
we all are. You know,
Sisyphus and all that. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely, and that's just what has to happen to make something. You know, how did our first Set Fire to the Stars happen? We decided I wanted to play Dylan Thomas. I wrote the script with Andy Goddard, and we sent it to Elijah Wood. You know that, and then we raised the money to make the film. That's what happened. You know, I wasn't sort of by a swimming pool. And some guy went, "Hey kid, you know you'd be a good Dylan Thomas. Here's some bucks to make your movie." You know,
I wish that happened, but you know,
it doesn't happen. Yeah. It doesn't happen. Where's the camera? It doesn't happen. You know.
Okay, so I would like to talk a little bit about the stories and the theme more specifically. I mean, I've got just a quote here. It strikes me the very first thing we see, you know, when this film plays, is a title card that states, you know, in the UK there is one acquired brain injury every 90 seconds. So you are dealing right from the very first second of the film with clearly a very serious topic. So I'm wondering, you know, what is the approach to that? I see you've got someone credited who's advising on these things as well, but, you know, what is that side of things like, the themes and the topics behind the film and the story?
it's just a very real thing. They call it the silent epidemic. The most amazing thing you cannot account for is people's reaction to what you put out there. You know, you can talk to financiers and you can wonder what happens with a critical response and actors and business and stuff like that. But what you're not ready for is when people go and see the story and it affects them, and then you get a reaction. It was phenomenal, and you realize that so many people, whether it's dementia, traumatic brain injury, anything sort of a change in sort of someone's neurological makeup, changing their heart, a diagnoses. Lots of us have been affected by it. We have, and so it's a very real subject. So when the film came out, there's one thing I wanted to add is that there's a new cut of the film coming out this year. Okay. And that's what this is, and I'm really, really proud of it. And so there's certain things that I learned from the previous cut that kind of went out there, and you just have to present that fact up so people can go, okay, this is what we're in for. And then you go, it's okay. It's going to be fun, and it's going to be moving, and it's going to be entertaining, and it's not going to be too heavy. Yep. But it is there. It's a real thing. So you just sort of head it on full, you front it up. So, for example, we went to the festivals in Zurich and Dinard and stuff like that. And there was one screening in Dinard where like what felt like the whole audience followed me into the street after the film. And I was there for 45 minutes to an hour in the street with people pulling people over who couldn't speak English, translating from French to English to me, to ask me questions or to tell me stories about their life, about they'd experienced caring for someone, or they'd been changed by something, or they'd know what it's like to be forgotten. And they wanted to know where that came from for me, And because this process has been long, you say the play was in 2008, and here we are in 2024 with the release of the movie. Since then, I'm older and more lived in and had all these experiences, and I'm a parent 3 times over, and all these things have changed. And but when I started, when I joined the play, it was like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing piece of writing and a world I did not know. And in 2024, it's a world I know too well, personally and through other things, So, so when I see people, they want to talk about it because that feeling of being forgotten by somebody you love is really, really powerful and really heavy, and it hits people at an emotional core that they really appreciate. It's really cathartic for them. So, yes, the traumatic brain injury, it's a very, very real thing. The science behind it is very, very sound. Kate had already done a super ton of research into the play, beautifully sort of researched, so the detail was there. So then when anything else we did on top of that just made it even more richer. It was passed through Headway charity and stuff like that, so they'd seen it. People who've been had traumatic brain injury or been affected by it, and authors and podcasters and stuff like that. So it went through some rigor. Yeah. And the thing that keeps coming back to it, are the themes that keep people going are humor and love and kindness, and strength. All those beautiful things that happen, that why we go back to stories again, why Shakespeare is so endurable, why poetry, means so much, why the power of art and stuff like that. That sort of, the science is there to just go, yep, it's real, and the facts are real, and the enduring factors are just like in any good story. So yeah, am I being clear? I should say.
I think so. I mean, these are universal themes, and I think that story about the screening in Switzerland,
in France, France,
it hits home. I think the fact that I mean, we'll maybe even talk about it a bit more at some point, but I was wondering about screenings because when you're doing something that's going to have such a personal connection, because that's the thing, if it's affecting this many people, when people watch this film, I am not surprised you get this type of reaction because you've really gone into the world and you've shown something that's going to resonate with a lot of people.
It's a good cry. The film is a good cry, a good healthy cry. At the same time, it's daft and humorous and
it's good.
And all those things, especially with Joe's character, all of a sudden, you have to find a reason why she loves him so much at the same, and you show that through lightness and humor and stuff. But deep down there's a dark well as well, and fear, and that whole cigarette section was very powerful in the play, and it became a very strong chamber piece in the movie. So yes, that was amazing in dinner. They just wanted to know, more, tell them about their mothers, their sisters, their fathers, their uncles, to understand it, because once the change is happening, it's really happening, and there's no going back. And I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that, but you sort of, I remember Terry Jones of Monty Python fame and I were both patrons of the same cinema in Colwyn Bay, and we still are, but Terry is no longer with us. And but I remember meeting Terry just at the point where his brain tumour was taking effect, and all I knew of Terry was this most brilliantly intelligent, funny firebrand. But yet you were meeting somebody just on the other side of this that was beginning to change that. And you go, wow, okay, these things are really hard to reverse. In fact, they're impossible to reverse. They can be slowed down and managed and stuff like that. But I just remember thinking, oh gosh, isn't life surprising and cruel that you can, and it can happen to us all, it could absolutely happen to us all. It's happening to family members of mine right now, where we're the wrong side of it, and that's when memory and love and kindness and community and hope and dreams and entertainment and films and music and art become really, really important. Stories become really important.
Yes. I mean, thinking about that story and these themes and topics, you're exploring them through these two couples. So Sarah, Joe, Tony, and Gwen. And we are seeing, like you say, we're seeing the humor, we're seeing their relationship, but we're also seeing them come to terms over the course of the film with something, unspeakably sad in many ways. And it's very human, I think, to see them interact and with each other as well.
Thank you.
You have structured the film in a really interesting way. So I'd like to touch on that in relation to the themes. What led to the decision to sort of structure it in the way you have before, after? We have these clear title cards that sort of take us into different sections of those relationships with the characters and how they intersect. What was the thinking behind the structure in relation to, I suppose, the emotional payoff in many ways of what you're trying to give to the audience?
Great question. I really hope I'm living up to them. But the it's understanding that kind of 3-act structure, so that. And that sort of lived in 3-act structure, or in Shakespeare's 7 stages of man or whatever it is. And so I think we have to understand where we are at that moment. And there's a scene in the film which we wrote that isn't in the play, where Gwen is teaching the nurse Moses, played by Patrick Elu. Trina sort of explains how she played the cello.
Yes, okay.
And she said, you have to find your zero, and it's the moment you after you've lifted up the bow before you bring it down. It's that moment just of change where you commit an action, pause, and then change by creating music. And I thought that was a kind of a really nice metaphor. So for this film, we meet them, the reason of sort of structuring and labeling in that way is so the audience are clear, like, you want to keep hope alive. You want to be rooting for them because you meet them. at crises and you meet them in chaos, you know. So you want to know that by having those structures that there is sort of, you know, there is survival, you know, hope within the cards. It's not just something very nihilistic and you know, it's got to be about going through that hell. So it was just aware that, you know, this is now, and this is happening now, and it's happening because this happened before, you know, and this is what we're like after. So in some ways, it was finding the most simplest way to explain the most complex of things, really. So the audience are with the story all along. So, you know, when they do what they do, we're not judging them in a way that kind of, you know, I always think if I'm playing the most horrific character, or creating the most horrific character, I'm looking for the beaten heart, I'm looking for the soft spot, I'm looking for the weakness, I'm looking for the child. Yeah. And if I'm given the sweetest, kindest character, I'm looking for the teeth, I'm looking for the bone, I'm looking for the harder edge. Because I think that's the human experience. You know, I think we all have everything. We have a moral universe inside of us. And so with these characters, you know, I don't want you to fall out with them, because when they make the wrong decision, and at the same time, I don't want you to be misled when they make the right decision. So it's this sort of balance of things. But yeah, so structurally, it's also about what a condition, you know, when a damage happens to the brain, parts of the brain die, but the new pathways are created, new networks are created, but they're different. And that's why people's behavior and ideas and thoughts and personalities can change, because actually part of the brain is damaged, can just stop, but yet a new you is created throughout it. So I guess we wanted the film to echo that, you know, the film to feel like a smashed vase, to feel like a broken brain. So there had to be a level of crisis and trauma, and there had to be a level of chaos, and there has to be a level of rebuild, and then it's like a kintsugi vase. It's back together. You can see the scars, but they're beautiful and it's stronger.
I mean, yeah, now you're saying that, I can see that actually even more clear from your intention that putting the vase together that smashed, you know, with gold like that, the kintsugi, isn't it? Yeah. The Japanese art form. Yeah. Yes. In many ways, I mean, you know, without spoiling anything, that is what the structure of the film feels like to me. Yes, we see the thing get broken and we see it get put together in a new, more hopeful way than it was at the beginning, certainly. Yes, that is very cool. And also, when you're mentioning it about the scene with the cello and the mention of zero, I'm now just putting the pieces together that your first title card in the film is zero. Yeah. So, in fact, yes, the entire time throughout the film, you're commenting on these things in different ways, and yeah, the structure is actually really nice in relation to, you know, how everything comes together. I think it gives us that ending that maybe is not expected, but for me feels hopeful. Yes.
Yeah. And absolutely, and we knew, and that was different in the play.
Okay.
You know, but theatre can do that, because at least it's a different art form, and you're in the room together and you're feeling and experiencing a different type of story in a different way, and you might not need that resolution at the end. But I think with film, and we've lived these characters up front, and they've been broken, and they've been happy, and we've watched them get happier without each other, and get sadder with each other, and vice versa, or different things. So the ending needed to have a level of hope and a change, exactly as you say it. You know, we're together, we're just different, but we're stronger and we're experienced, and the scars are visible, but they're kind of beautiful.
Yes, exactly. You're not shying away from it at all, which is very interesting.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Well, I mean, it was always take a big theme and try and tell it.
Okay, so a huge part of this film is music. So let's talk about this. The music in the film, first of all, is fantastic. So well done, for having the discernment to have, Griff Rhys and all these different elements in there. So what is the process like of approaching someone like Griff? I know you've worked together before, but in this instance, it's such a huge part of the film. You're putting a lot of faith in him. How does that conversation go?
Well, I mean, I have faith in Griff because I think he's a genius and he could find melody with a glass of water. It's unavoidable for him. You could give him the most out of tune thing and he'll create some sugary melody that breaks your heart. And I guess that was one of the challenges which he was really open for when we were scoring the movie, because he'd be like, it's too melodic, and sometimes when you put that together with a picture, it can feel like we're steering the ship a little bit too falsely. But he's a great human being, and he's unbelievably talented. And I guess one of the challenges for him is that I'm sometimes too much of a fan. And I'm like, I love it. And he's like, what do you think of this? I love it. You know what I mean? And other directors would be like, maybe it's not quite right. But I'm like, I just love it all. And, so I'd have to get over that side of the fan person in me, kind of getting over that. What came out of, I always wanted to work with Griff. I just think he's a unique talent. I love his Super Furries and I love the solo work. I love it, experimental, but also when we did Set Fire to the Stars, I always had the idea of asking Griff to do it because I love the idea of this sort of, I think he is a very important Welsh figure, Griff, just as Dylan Thomas is a really important Welsh figure. And in some ways, him commenting on Dylan being part of there made sense to us. And when we did Almond, in the script I'd written Nick Cave tracks and Tom Waits tracks and stuff like that, just to help the reader as they go along. And chatting to Griff, he was like, I like that track, I like this. And as we got going, we sort of went, well, because we're talking about zero and we're talking about now, we're talking about new, we started thinking, well, what if everything was new? What if, and it came from a conversation of, I was like, well, what band could tie Joe and Sarah together, to tie Rebel and myself's characters together, even when they forget who they are and they get challenged. I was thinking, is there music that they would have loved at college and grown up with and had an album and been to see a band live? Who could that band be? And then we were like, well, why don't we just invent that band? And Griff was like, yeah, why doesn't the band be Griff? And then we pushed it, and then I thought of films like Altman's, The Long Goodbye, where they keep having that track played in different types of ways all the way through that movie. I thought, well, what if this became a theme, this sort of this unreliable world, the chaotic world that these characters find themselves in. What if we have a bit of reliability in a musical guide, a musical narrator? Why not it be Griff? He can write anything. He can do, he can do jazz. He can do, electronica. He can do pop and rock and all those things. So we just tried that, and he ended up doing everything. And I just love the idea of that. I love the fact that the song coming out of the radio feels like a familial thing to everybody, but it's an original song for the movie. So yeah, I just creatively and experimentally, and it just felt right for the story that as these characters were rediscovering the world and each other for the first time and themselves for the first time, the audience could be discovering these pieces of music for the first time. So it sort of did something when Joe and his TBI is when he's way down the road with his condition and situation and can't remember the love of his life, there's still part of him knows he loves her and finds her attractive and wants to connect with her. And I thought, well, we could do that with the music as well. You don't know this song, but you do. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
They play it like it's a classic. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you don't know this track, but actually it's something brand new. So it was another way of making sense of the chaos, I think, and finding something new within the film. And he's great.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a really good soundtrack. I think I was, throughout the film, I also spotted, I think Lisa Jen Brown is in there.
Yeah, and she's in the film.
And she's in the film.
She's in the film. Yeah, yeah. In the dance sequence, I mean, that is a phenomenal lineup. Griff in the movie, Charlotte Gainsbourg goes to this, goes for a cathartic night out on her own to just dance her troubles away, and there's a band in a little bar, but the band's made up of Lisa Jen from Naubach and Cliff Spurlock on the drums, who used to play for the Flaming Lips and now plays and produces with Griff, and Infamity, who is this world-renowned Bellafon player, and Griff wrote the song and produced it. And he's actually in the crowd in that scene at the back.
Is he?
Yeah,
Okay.
You can't quite, but you know he's there. So I like that little Easter egg where you go 3 renowned 6 music idols are playing in this bar. You know what I mean, in New Brighton with with Griff sitting in the background in the club, and Charlotte Gainsbourg is dancing. Right. I mean, Charlotte's an amazing musician herself as well. And she did an album with Beck called IRM, which is French for MRI.
Okay.
And she had a brain trauma herself. And when she was in the MRI scanner, it had this whoa, 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 whoa sound that she found very, very cathartic. Mm-hmm. So she sampled it, and there's a song called MRI or IRM. And that the albums were all based on an MRI machine, which Beck produced, and Charlotte sort of wrote and sings on and stuff. Wow. So there's loads of connected tissue in the story, in the film, in the making of it. I love Rebel Wilson doing something different. I love Griff Rhys scoring a movie, and I love Charlotte Gainsbourg in a movie like this in the UK, and all those elements, all those surprising, because they're the things that I like about. And I wish for myself, and enjoy the engagement of something new and something different. If you buy the album, there's a cover that Akiko, who's this amazing film poster artist, she designed for the vinyl, and I think you can. It's the cover that's on if you download and stream the album as well, and. I'm really pushing the UK distributor to use it as the poster for the movie because it just says so much.
Is this with the candle?
Yeah.
I love this image. Yes, the candle in the shape of a person and it's burning down. Yeah, it's perfect.
It's perfect. Well, there we go. You've heard it now. Yeah. Film Hub Wales. We'll start the lobby now because I think it's a cool image that will do justice to the film and its performances, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I mean, thinking about Wales in that case, I did want to talk a little bit about that as a topic. The film was partly shot in Wrexham. You are Welsh. The Film Cymru were involved. Mad as Birds, obviously a production company based in Wales as well. So a lot of Welsh elements, not just the musicians, but...
and we filmed, 50 meters from where we're sitting right now?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. You can basically see it. Yeah,
it's really, really, really spooky, actually.
So what's the decision behind that? Because obviously the film is not set in Wales, but I'm imagining that you are, as a person and everything I know about you, you're wanting to support Wales with film. Is that where it comes from, the desire to shoot something in Wrexham?
I want to support Wales, and Wales has always supported me, and I want to see more production coming into Wales, specifically North Wales. I'm from Anglesey. I think, it's got a lot to offer, and also it's a viable industry, and we do it really, really well, and I want young people to know that it is a viable industry that they can join in and be part of and engage with, and it's not just a surprise. I also loved whenever, Hollywood came to town, I love what it does to the world, where people go, wow, I mean, a lot of it is driven by us, specifically myself, because I got a kick out of Elijah Wood going to Swansea and Judi Dench going to Llanelli and Eddie Izzard going to Llandudno and Rebel in Wrexham. So wherever I can, I will, and I do.
Yep.
Also, Film Cymru came to our rescue because we were going to shoot the majority of it elsewhere, and because of COVID and various other reasons, and a big chunk of the budget fell through, and Film Cymru came to the film's rescue. And when you are, when you make something in Wales, the sort of structure of that finance is that you really need to spend that money in Wales, which is only right. So it's not the fact that a film company or production company or an individual gets given loads of money and then they do what they want. No, it's really granular, and it's really well looked at. So part of the process was, before we were able to, I would have brought the whole thing to Wales, but the finance structure was all things. Sure. But all of a sudden, this money came in, and we could come in and film for a week in Wales. But also, I could do a lot of the post-production in Wales as well, because it's not just about the minutes that you spend on camera. Because as you know, it takes 8-10 weeks to prep a film and 12-14 weeks to post a film. It's like the shortest bit is the filming bit. That's the shortest bit. It was all those things, really. And the more we do, the more it happens, the more sustainable it comes as an industry, and the better we are at it. And there's no reason we can't be like what happened in New Zealand after Lord of the Rings, where, can be a service industry for other countries and films and projects. That's totally fine. But we can also be, an incubator of talent and a creator and of stories, because we can do city and town and village and coastal and rural and different periods, and we have castles, of course, and stuff like that, and mountains, and so we're very versatile. Yes, and North Wales is really versatile. It's the Peter Sellers of film locations, and I think so. Yeah, and I'm from Anglesey. I grew up in Holyhead. I all the family are there. I went to the high school there. I left when I was 18, and there was an actor who lived on the mountain as a kid, and the idea that somebody who'd been in a James Bond film lived on the mountain was like, oh my God, a unicorn is roaming the streets. So, there's it's a big answer to a short question, because it's everything that swims around our own imaginations. Like, wow, what if? Do you know what I mean? Wouldn't it be brilliant if wouldn't it be brilliant if Ryan Reynolds bought Wrexham Football Club? You know what I mean? Wouldn't it be brilliant if Rebel Wilson came and shot a movie here? Why not? Because it's got to be somewhere.
Exactly. Why not? It is fun. And I remember this period of time, and it was very exciting, as it always is. Wrexham has had its fair share of those type of moments of like, do you know who's here right now? In the past couple of years, the shoot with Rebel being one of them on this street. Just a few days ago, my friend Leighton, who was the cinematographer on my last short film, he's now an Emmy-winning cinematographer for his work on Welcome to Wrexham. Wow. Now, just the mechanisms by which something like that becomes possible that you couldn't possibly predict is almost hilarious. A Hollywood star buys your football club, a local filmmaker wins an Emmy. These type of things happen, and it's very strange. Rebel Wilson comes to town. Yeah, exactly.
It does happen.
It does happen. Yeah,
yeah, it does happen. And the only thing we have to change is our attitude. That and just accept it, that it does happen and can happen and should happen. And
why not?
Why not? Why not? let's never lose the wonder. Let's never become arrogant. Like, yeah, Robert De Niro's in the chippy, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let's not become that. But also just go, it can happen. You know, I'm going to go and shoot a movie in Anglesey in a couple of months, and just as an actor. And there will be people who will be like, I went to school with him. He was just an idiot at school, kind of like didn't shut up. And all of a sudden, he does movies, and I've seen him do this, that, and whatever, and you go, yeah.
No, that's it, and it's all good for Wales, I think. I have some
Go for
just
it,
very quick questions, I guess, just to things I'm wondering about as usual from like a filmmaking perspective. First of all, how long was the shoot on this film?
24 days.
24 days. Did it feel like enough? It's never enough, is it?
It's never enough, but at the same time, I love the intensity of a short shoot. Set Fire to the Stars was 18 days. It was enough. I mean, we never went into overtime. There's something about focusing the mind of like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we've got to do it. We've got these amazing actors. You can't expect these A-list stars who do huge movies to come and be in your film for 8, 9 weeks, 10 weeks. They've got things they need to do. You've got to make it appealing for them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't mind a short shoot. In fact, I prefer the intensity. I prefer mad intensity, and then go home to the family and work it out. So, 24 days, it was enough for this, for sure.
You're acting as well as directing. What's your relationship with playback? Will you watch takes, or do you like to just keep going and you've got it when you feel it?
Yeah, I mean, some people don't want to see what they've done. Some people need to see everything that they're doing. You just have to sort of play by ear. With this film, I mean, in some ways, even though Joe's a very big character in the movie, we got everything done. So we were in Wrexham from the get-go.
Yeah.
Well, we did day one in Liverpool in the museum stuff, and then we came to Wrexham. So I shot the majority of mine and Rebel's relationship in the first few days. Excuse me. So majority of the relationship in the first few days. And so then I went with just a director because I wasn't in the other scenes with the other actors. Yeah, okay. So that bit was sort of intense and we were done, and then I was just full on director mode. And then 2 weeks later, I came and finished off the other bit. So I was bookended, so I didn't feel like I was, I didn't feel like I was Bradley Cooper in Maestro, where I was sort of in it all the time, as a sort of titular role kind of thing. So in terms of playback for myself, only if it was technical, because I had Tom watching me as well.
Of course, that helps, yeah.
So that helps. And, but for everyone else, I just kind of, kept it going and didn't do too much playback unless there was a problem.
Okay.
But I'm watching the monitor all the time.
So you've done this now as a piece of theatre, as a film. I'm wondering about the release and the reception, and you're very experienced in this area. I've done a little bit of this. You do theatre, you do film, and those audiences are sometimes different, sometimes the same, and sometimes it's unexpected. So what's been the reaction to the film? And because you've been looking at this same story through, these different art forms, what's the key difference to you? How does it feel?
The answer is we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen.
That's true. It's not gone fully into cinemas at this point, I should say, obviously, yeah.
No, I mean, when we did the film festivals, which was a different cut, I watched it and I knew film festivals are a different audience because they're there for the whole ride. So they're there for the big release at the end and stuff like that, and it's satisfying, and you're there for a Q&A and you're talking to people, so they're discerning audience, and they're watching the whole thing in on a screen in a full room, and I think that, but when I was, and it was great to win the jury prize and things like that. That was lovely, but I kept thinking, if we can go back, I would change some things of this cut, which is what we've done for the UK. And, I just think, who knows? I mean, I'm very proud of the performances that the cast give. So I think if you like performance driven and great acting, that it's there. The world is very well researched, and it's a topic that is really affects a lot of people. If you just want to watch great acting and be moved and, chuckle, it's there too.
Some very quick questions about the cinema for you, which I've been asking everyone. So did you go to the cinema as a child? And if you did, which cinema was it, I'm wondering?
Well, I went to the Empire Cinema in Holyhead.
Okay.
And it was opened at various different times. It also has a very dark past because it was owned by a very prolific serial killer at some point. Okay. So that was an interesting time where, but yeah, I saw Ghostbusters at the cinema. I saw Pulp Fiction at the cinema. I saw Indiana Jones at the cinema. It was, everything. And then there was a little cinema in Bangor called the Plaza.
Okay.
Where I guess in my mid to late teens, I used to go when there was no cinema in Holyhead for a while, we'd go to there, and that was a sticky carpet ex-bingo hall. But it was everything. And I saw Jurassic Park there. I saw Leon there. I saw, all these sort of, movies. And, it was, and also my father worked on the ferries, and when we'd go over on the boats between Holyhead and Dunleary, there was a cinema on there, and I loved seeing movies on the boat. Yeah, it was great. So, I guess now I might be like, we must go to that cinema because the projection's really great and the sound's really great, and they do the blah, 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 blah. But, when I was a kid, it was just a big screen.
Yes.
And sticky carpets and thick velvet seats, but it was brilliant. It was brilliant. And I remember intermissions. I remember intervals.
Yeah, we don't have them anymore, really. No,
unless they're built into the, but yeah.
My most bizarre experience in the cinema was when I was in Turkey. I went to watch a random film. I just had a little bit of time off. I would just go relax. And at like a random point around halfway through the film, it just turned off. Like there was a big noise, projector went black, it went off. I walked outside, and I think there's a technical issue. Everyone leaves. I think there might even be like a security issue, right? And as soon as I go outside, every single person who's not me, who's Turkish, is smoking. And it's clear that this is an intermission, but like they forced an intermission into the film. And I spoke to some friends I had there, and they were like, "Yeah, does this not happen everywhere else?" I was like, "No, nowhere else just turns the film off and has a cigarette." So yeah, some countries, as much as we don't have intermissions anymore, they put them in there. So fair dues.
Yeah. Switch it off, go to a fag, come back. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that was fun. But yeah, I think the only time I've actually had one was when I went to see The Hateful Eight. I don't know why this was, but they had an intermission in the special.
Yeah, he built it in it.
Was it part of it? Yeah. Okay, yes. Okay, that was it then.
I remember as a kid thinking, if I loved a film, I was like, I wish I could forget it. Did you ever think that?
To watch it again and experience
and have the same experience again. I wish I didn't know what I knew, so I could go back and have the whole experience again, which is a very sweet, naive notion, but...
Thank you for having this conversation with me and answering all these things. Of course, I'm thinking about so much when I'm watching this. It's good to have the opportunity to talk to you about it properly. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing it in a cinema at some point. This is going to be great.
I appreciate you, mate. And a great job. And really, really think it's fantastic that you're doing what you're doing. And thanks for the consideration and the thought. Appreciate you.